Good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Yevamos, Daf Lamed Zayin, and we're starting at the two dots about a quarter of the way down. Sorry, just got to readjust the screen here. There you go. We're starting on Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph about a quarter of the way down at the words ben. At the word Safek Ben, I can't even get the first word out. Okay, not even one. It's a bad start to Daf Yomi for tonight. It's how I feel, and it's coming out. Okay, so we had said in our Mishnah that there was a case scenario where a Yavam, a potential Yavam, he had married his brother's wife while she was pregnant, right after he had died, right after the husband had died. And that, of course, is problematic. And the Mishnah had said that it was a Safek Ben Tesha, Safek Ben Shiva. Had it been a Ben Tesha, then it would have been the child of the initial husband. Had it been a Ben Sheva, then the assumption is that it would have been the child of the new husband, of the Yavam. But we are not sure who's who. And we don't know how long the gestational period is. Again, we have a lot of signs that they didn't have. So they did not know how long the gestational period was for this particular child. So Amar le Rav Rav Nachman, le mahalach achar rov nashim. Why don't we just go with our general rules and say we should follow what the majority of women do? Rov nashim latisha yaldan. Most people have a gestational period of 9 months, and therefore we should assume it belongs to the first husband. And if it belongs to the first husband, then there's no yibum. Fine. Says the Gemara, well, it doesn't always work that way. Amar le, Rav Nachman says back to Rava, Nashe didan l'shiva yaldan. He says women in our neighborhood, they give birth after 7 months. Amar le, Nashe didchu habaruba dalma. That's weird. The women there who are giving birth, that's not normal. The normal amount of time for a gestational pregnancy is 9 months. So why that doesn't mean anything. So Amar le hachika amina. Really, says Rav Nachman, here's really what's going on. Rov nashim yaldan latisha umiut l'shiva. Most women give birth after 9 months, and a small percentage of women give birth after 7. V'chol hayoldos latisha, and anyone who has a gestational period of 9 months, ubra nikar l'shlish yameha. The pregnancy is noticeable after a third of the days, meaning after 3 months. V'zo, and in this case, hol v'lo hukar ubra l'shlish yameha, because with this particular child, when the 3-month mark hit, we did not see any pregnancy. Isra'le ruba, the rove has fallen off, and that's why we are besafek, because there was a chazaka, there was a rove, and then because you broke the rule of the rove, which is that you didn't show pregnancy after 3 months, so therefore we're not sure what you are. We have no idea. Says the Gemara, you have to play off one word that it says here. Ikol hayoldos latisha ubra nikar l'shlisha meha. If it's true that all, not rove, but if it's true that all women who have a 9-month gestational period show pregnancy after about 3 months, so then that's for sure a 7-month pregnancy, and it definitely belongs to the second husband. So that's why the Gemara has a problem with the language of Rav Nachman, because he had said that all women who have a 9-month gestational period show at 3 months, and that's not true. Ella, says the Gemara, you're absolutely right. Halfway down Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph, Ella Ema, it shouldn't say all women of 9 months. It should say Rov Hayoldos Latisha Ubra Nikar L'Shlisha Meh, that most women who have a 9-month pregnancy start to show around 3 months. And this particular person, their rove, Isra'le Ruba, their rove was ruined, their rove was undone, and therefore we're left besafek. And that is how the Gemara concludes this aspect of Safek in our Mishnah, that we have a rove. The rove is that most women who have a gestational period of 9 months show their pregnancy around 3 months. And when this woman didn't show her pregnancy around the 3-month mark, her rove was ruined, and now we're just left besafek. Otherwise, it's true. Like, had it been that she was showing at 3 months, we would have known what the answer is. We would have known that it belongs to the first husband, because you don't show it 1 month. We assume that it belongs to the previous husband. But when there is that reisa, when there is that negative against a rove, this is a very lamdish sugya. It's like, this is fodder for the Rishonim. When you have a rove, the rove should work. But something went against the rove. There was a reisa that undid the rove, and therefore our Mishnah remains besafek, because she was not showing at the 3-month mark. End of sugya number 1 for today. All right. Sugya number 2, Tana Rabbanan. In our Mishnah, we had said that the Yavam, or the potential Yavam, married this woman, and a child was born. This child, Rishon, the first of their children, Roi Lios Kohen Gadol. We don't We have no idea who the child belongs to. There's no paternity tests. This child, they're not a halal, they're nothing. They can be a Kohen Gadol. All is well. All is well. Visheni, but if this couple now has another child, well, by virtue of the fact that the first child survived, and we think that it's a very big possibility that that child might have belonged to the initial husband, in which case there was no din of yibum and it's usher for them to sleep together. And now they had a second child, Visheni mamzer misafek. So the Tana Kama of this brisa writes that the second child is a safek mamzer. Comes along Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov and says, Omer, ein mamzer misafek, and then he stops talking. There's no such thing as a mamzer misafek. What Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov did not tell us is what actually is the status of this child. All we know is that according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is that it's not a mamzer. There's no safek mamzer. So what is it? Is it a vaday mamzer or is it a vaday not mamzer? We don't know. So says the Gemara, we need to figure out the shita of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. We are going to see a triple layered link between Tanaim here, Tanaim and Amoraim. And link number one is this one, though it's vague, we have to analyze it, where the Tana Kama says that the second child is a safek mamzer. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, ein mamzer misafek, but we don't understand Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So my Kamar, what is his shita? What does it mean that ein mamzer misafek? So this is a machlokas Abaye and Rava. Here's layer number two. Amar Abaye hachi ka'amar. This is really what the Tana Kama and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov are arguing about. Rishon Roilios Kohen Gadol, everyone agrees. The first child who's born from this marriage, because of the safek status of the conception of this child, who is the father, he can be whatever he wants when he grows up. V'sheni safek mamzer v'aser b'mamzeres, and this is a slight expansion of the Tana Kama shita that the second child is a safek mamzer, and a safek mamzer is not allowed to marry a mamzeres. A mamzeres can only marry a mamzer proper, not a safek mamzer. We'll learn about this more in a moment. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, however, how does Abaye understand his shita? Omer, no safek mamzer. That's not a safek mamzer. Ela vaday mamzer umuter b'mamzeres. So his vague answer in the initial presented brisa at the Tanu Rabbanan, where we started this new sugya, his vague answer of ein mamzer isafek means to imply that he's a vaday mamzer. That's a very strong shita to say that he's a vaday mamzer, because it's not vaday that the child belongs to the first husband. If the child belonged to the second husband, to the Yavam, so then that means that there was yibum and the child shouldn't be a mamzer. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is holding a firm line that this child is a mamzer and he can only marry a mamzeres. That's shitas Abaye. Rava, however, understands this brisa as follows. Rava amar hachi kamar. This is the proper pshat in the brisa. Rishon Roilios Kohen Gadol at the Tana Kama, as we've seen already, holds that of course that this child, no problem, they can even be the Kohen Gadol. The Sheni, listen to this language. What does a Rava hold that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds? He says, V'sheni mamzer vaday misafik. What does that mean? What does that mean? The Gemara doesn't like it. But the Gemara says it's a mamzer vaday misafik. It's a mamzer vaday. We treat him as a mamzer vaday, but it's betor safik. We would have called that a suffix, but the Gemara says it's a mamzer vada misafek umuter b'mamzeres, and because huge thing, you can marry a mamzeres. What?
That's his vada is a guess.
So his vada is a very strong suffix. His mamzer vada is a super strong suffix. But look at the next line, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer. What are you talking about? Ein vada mamzer misafek. That's not a thing. You just made that up. That's called a suffix. It's not called mamzer vaday misafek. It's just a suffix. So you can't, and to marry a mamzeres, that's crazy town. That's like an Isser Doraisa on top of everything else that's going on in this very complex family tree. It's not good. Ella, so Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov changes what the Tana Kama says. He says, Ella safek mamzer. It's a safek mamzer. Ve'aser b'mamzeres. So this is the machlokas between Abaye and Rava as to how to understand the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. What are they arguing about? Why is it that Abaye felt compelled to explain Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov the way he did, that really we're talking about a vaday mamzer? And why is it that Rava felt that we were talking about a safek mamzer? So says the Gemara, V'kamiflage bid Rabbi Elazar. This is the third layer. So we have the resulting layer of the brisa that we saw, which is hard to understand. We have Abaye and Rava trying to explain the brisa, and then we have the underpinnings of Abaye and Rava rooted in this machlokes about Rabbi Elazar, not to be confused, although we might be confused, but not to be confused with Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. This is Rabbi Elazar. This is not Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So who is this Rabbi Elazar? Ditznan. The Mishnah writes about 15 lines or so from the bottom. Rabbi Elazar Omer, Vada'an bevada'an mutter. If you have a vadai mamzer and if you have another vadai mamzeres, they can marry. The Torah writes elsewhere, it's a mamzer vadai amarachman of mamzer safek. A mamzer can marry a mamzeres can marry a mamzer, but that's it. Vada'an bisveikan bivada'an. If one of the two in the couple is a safek, then they're not allowed to marry. Bisveikan also asur. If you have two sveikos mamzer, they cannot marry each other either. Ve'eluhein sveikan. Here are types of people who have a middle of the road status as it relates to mamzerus. Shtuki, ve'asufi, ve'kusi. These are three categories of people. Fascinating Rashi. Rashi is about a third of the way down from the top of the page. Two-thirds of the way down from the top of the page. Look what Rashi says by Shtuki. Shekore aviv ve'imo. Shekore aviv. He sees someone. He says, "Oh, is that my father?" Ve'imo mishas kaso. And the mother's like, "Shh, stop talking. Stop talking. No, that's not your father." She doesn't know because it's a mamzer. The child's a suffix mamzer. We don't know who the father was, and maybe the father was related to the brother. We don't know. It's a suffix mamzer. So that's what a shtuki is. Ve'asufi is its own definition. Rashi says shenesaf min ashuk. She has mamish no clue how she got pregnant. The third case is a kusi suffix mamzers because they don't hold the regular laws of kedushin. Fine. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav halacha k'Rebbe Lazar. Rav holds that the halacha is like Rebbe Lazar. That's part one. Where did Rabbi Yehuda learn? First by Rav and then by Rabbi Yehuda. Sorry, first by Rav and then by Shmuel. Look at the next line. Rabbi Yehuda then switches Batei Medrash. Ki amrisa kamei de Shmuel. When I was telling Shmuel what I learned by Rav that we hold like Rebbe Lazar, he flipped out. Rabbi respectfully flipped out. Amar li Hillel Shana. Hillel taught us. Asara yuchsin alumi Bavel. There were 10 families that were miyuchasin that had their own ancestry all ironed out, who came up from Bavel back to Eretz Yisrael. Kohane v'Levie, there were Kohanim and Levim v'Yisraele, and there were also Yisraelim, Chalale, Gere, Charure, Mamzere, Netike, Shtuki, v'Asufi. All of these types of people who were in not such great positions in regards to their marriageable status. Not a good look on the marriage resume. You know, the shviger, she wears patent leather shoes and a robe to the table, and I'm an Asufi. This is not a good combo deal. All of these sveikos. What does the Shita say in the name of Hillel and the name of Shmuel? They're allowed to marry one another. Now, Rashi highlights they're not allowed to all marry one another, but there's truncations within this grouping to say that some are allowed and some are not allowed. Ve'at Amres, and you, Yehuda, you're telling me that you heard from Rav that halacha is ki Rebbe Lazar, that we hold like Rebbe Lazar. So what do we see? We see that Abaye and Rava don't agree on whether or not we hold like Rebbe Lazar. There's two shitas in Rebbe Lazar. Rav holds like Rebbe Lazar, and Shmuel doesn't hold the Rebbe Lazar. Abaye savar la kishmuel, damar halacha kehillel. Abaye, he is the one who's of the opinion that said that when Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says that ein mamzerus, in this case, he means that it's not a suffix mamzer, but it's a vadai mamzer, the second child born to this couple, where they should not have gotten married and she actually had a baby. We don't know whose baby it is. Is it the initial brother or the second brother? So there, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says that child is a vadai mamzer. That's in line with Shmuel, damar halacha kehillel, umuki la Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov aliba de hilchasa. We aligned the shita of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov to align with Hillel. Why? Ki hechi de lo tikshe hilchasa ahilchasa. So that we don't ever set up Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov in a position where we don't hold like him, because we always hold like him. We're just going to skip just for a moment. Just turn to the top of the next page and look at Rashi on the top of the page for a moment. We'll come right back. Why is it that we're so strict about Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, that whatever he says has to align with the Mari Mekomos? Because says Rashi, the Kaimalan, Mishnas Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Kav Vinaki. We do see his name a lot throughout Shas. However, whenever he gives a psak, we always agree with him. And therefore, Abaye had to twist his understanding of our Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov in our case to say that it was a vadai mamzer, because he also held like Shmuel, who said that there has to be an alignment. What did Shmuel say? Shmuel said, no, everyone's allowed to marry one another. So therefore, it can't be that it's a suffix mamzer, which would be usher. It has to be a vadai mamzer, which is mutter, because that's what Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds. And on the flip side, 3 lines from the bottom, Rava savar la kirav. Amar halacha k'Rebbe Lazar. He says halacha is like Rebbe Lazar, that we are, let's see, what does Rebbe Lazar say? Rebbe Lazar said in the beginning of his Mishnah, Rabbi Elazar said that the Sveikos cannot marry one another, and therefore Umuki la Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, we established the Shita of Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov to say that it's a suffix mamzer and it's usher, just like the Shita of Rav, just like the Shita of Rabbi Elazar. Ki hechi, for the same reason, the same motivator, the lo tikshi hilchasa top of Lamed Zayin Amud Beis, because we always know that Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov is right. So here's really, to summarize, here's what happened. We saw a little bit of a vague Shita of Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. The second child born to this couple is treated as an ain suffix mamzer, but we don't know what that meant. And Abaye translated it to be like Shmuel because he agreed with Shmuel in regards to the fact that we allow for a suffix mamzer to marry. So therefore, in order to make Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov right, he established a case of Rabbi Eliezer to be a case of Vadai where you're allowed to get married, not a case of suffix where you're not. So that's it. And the same thing would also be true for Rava. Amar Abaye, on the top line of Lamed Zayin Amud Beis, Mina Aminallah. How do I know? The Chol Sveika Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov kevadai mashvile. How did I know that I should go this route and interpret the brisa in the middle of Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph this way? Because the Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, same person, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, the one who's kavanaki, Mishnah Rabbi Eliezer kavanaki. How do we know that we should treat his cases like a vadai? Because what does he say? Harei sheba al nashim harbe. A man is with many women, and some of them are having children. But ve'en yodea al ezehu mehen ba. He doesn't know who he had children with. V'chein he, a woman, one singular woman, shebo aleha anashim harbe, with whom a lot of men slept with her. Ve'en yodas, she doesn't know me'eze mehen kibla. She doesn't know whose child she's pregnant with. Nimtza av nose es bito v'ach nose es achoso v'nismale kol olam kulo. Mamzerim. If you have a scenario where people are cohabiting and having children without any responsibility whatsoever, you could easily have when we were little kids, it was the Maury Povich show. That was like the show every week. That's what we're talking about. What? I'm the youngest of my father in the room. It's true. So then this is what Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov was saying. What did he call them? He called them mamzerim. Is that bevadai? No, it's a suffix. But he called them mamzerim. So Abaye says, I see a raya brura from here. The Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov treats a suffix mamzer like a vadai mamzer. Yes, Dad.
So what is the halachic definition of mamzer? Is it different than what we talk about?
We colloquially use the word in ways that probably should not be used. That's for sure. But a mamzer is a child who is born of a relationship of Isser out of wedlock. That's kind of a definition that would work. So let's say that a married woman conceives from another man, child's a mamzer. She's married.
But if a child was born who never ever found out who his father was, is he a mamzer?
No, if his mother conceived when she wasn't married to another man. If she was a random penuya, let's say a random single, a girl in the community who's not married gets pregnant, that's not a mamzer. That's not a mamzer. It's only when she's married to person A and she conceives from person B and then has a child. That's mamzerus. So in general, we don't care about who the father is. In general, that's true in regards to halachic status. But in this case, because that man, person B, is allowed to have multiple wives. Right? A man is allowed to have multiple wives. So I'm not going to use myself as an example because you probably like your daughter-in-law. No, this is not a good story. I'm losing my train of thought. So what basically is happening? Let's say you have a girl, Chana. Okay, Chana is married to Chaim, and then she cheats and she sleeps with another man. She sleeps with Yaakov. That child's a mamzer. But had the genders been inverted, it wouldn't be true because a man can marry more than one woman. So if a man is married to Chana and he sleeps with Penina that's not a mamzer because he's allowed to have more than one wife. So that's not mamzerus. So it's quite subtle. There are other case scenarios and there are machlokos about this, but that's a general rule. This is the Gemara, what just presented in the top 10 lines, we're about 10 lines down, Lamed Zayin Amud Beis, presented this idea that we see from Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, that even though we're not sure that when this man was cohabiting with many women and when this woman was cohabiting with many men, and we don't know who the lineage, it's possible that there will be mamzerus, but he says that they are mamzerim, which is a very sharp language. It's very strong. Ve'al says the Gemara, that the land is filled with zima. This is a beautiful raya for Abaye. Abaye is showing the reason why I interpreted Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov to say that they're vadai mamzerim is because that's l'shitaso. Umala haaretz zima. So Virava, what will you say? Look at this play on words. Amar lach hachi kamar. The word zima doesn't mean what you think it means. Zu mahi. This one, what is it? It's just a question mark. It's a subject. We don't know if this person's a mamzer. Yes, no, maybe. So he says that's what the word zima means. And the way that you're interpreting the pasuk zima doesn't mean vadai. Even according to Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, it just means suffix. Yes, sir. Al Kain. The Brisa continues. Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Lo yisa adam isha b'medina zu v'yelech v'yisa isha b'medina acheres. You shouldn't have a wife in one country and a wife in another one. Shema yizdav guzel azevanimtzu achno seyas achoso. Because we may have a scenario where the children of wife A and the children of wife B will find each other and marry, and that will cause for problems. Says the Gemara. Eini, is that true? That you're not allowed to have a spouse in other cities? We've learned this following Gemara before many moons ago. We learned this in Maseches Yoma. When Rav would go to the city of Dardashir for reasons purely of Kedusha V'Tara, he would want to make sure that there was a woman there to whom he could be married for the short visit that he was there. And says the Gemara, it wasn't just him. For Rav Nachman, when he would go to the city of Shechnatziv, Machriz ve'Omar, man hav yoma. Who is interested in marrying me for the day? So that's what the Gemara says. We see that these people do that. So how can you tell me that you're not allowed to have wives in different cities? They had wives in their home cities. And then what happened? Then when they were traveling, then they had new wives in those local cities for a short amount of time. So it says the Gemara, Shiny Rabbanon Dipkiya Shmaihu. It's different. It's different. When you're married to the Gadol Hadors, everybody knows you're married to the Gadol Hador, and everybody knows that if there's a child to be born from the Gadol Hador, they know whose it is. That's like if you're a regular Joe, then that should not happen. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second, side question. Amar Rava, how can you just go into town and marry someone? If you request someone in marriage and she agrees, then you have to wait Sheva Nakim. We assume that due to the emotions involved in agreeing to marry, that there's possible that the body could have this dam chimud, this type of blood that exits a woman's body and makes her tmeya for Sheva Nakim. So these Rabbanim, Rav and Rav Nachman, they just can't walk into town and say, marry me right now. And they need to wait 7 days. Once the proposal is done, they have to wait 7 days. So the Gemara provides 2 answers. Rabbanan Shiluchayu Havu Mishadre Umodi Lahu. They sent messengers more than a week in advance, and they said, Rav is coming to town. Who would like to be his wife for the day? The Ibai Seima, another possibility is that they weren't having Tashma Shamita. Says the Gemara, really, the Ibai Seima, the Rabbanan, Yichude Ba'almuhu Dumiyachdi Lahu. It was just a marriage that allowed them to have yichud with one another, but they were not intimate. To Amar Mar, Eino Dome Mishiyesh Lo Pas Besalo, Lemisha Ein Lo Pas Besalo. A tremendous truth if we've ever heard one. For a person who knows that there is availability for intimacy, pas besalo, literally translated as bread in basket. There's an availability to eat food. When you know food is available, then you don't pine for it as much. When you know in theory Tashma Shemita is available, then you don't pine for it as much. So they were not actually sleeping with these people. It was just company, but it wasn't Tashma Shemita. Last piece of this, so again, then we're going to move to the challenging part of the day. Tana, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, Lo yisa adam ishto v'daito legarsha. You should not marry a woman when your das is to divorce her, mishum shene'emar, because the pasuk reads, Al tacharosh al re'echa ro'ah, v'hu yoshev levetach itach. You should not trample over your friend and do bad things when they are sitting comfortably. It's not nice. It's not appropriate. It might be halachically problematic. One should not marry a woman with intent to divorce her. 2 dots, halfway down. Right before the wide lines in the Gemara. We have been discussing the case of our Mishnah. Our Mishnah goes back a couple of blot to the beginning of the Perek Kacholetz Levimto. We have spoken about a case in our Mishnah, which is really what we've been analyzing the whole time of Hakones Yevimto. What if Ruvain dies and leaves Rachel, and Shimon marries Rachel while she's pregnant? That's what we've been discussing. So now we're going to take it to the next level. Let's say that this child is born. We'll call the child Chaim. Maybe we should just call the child Suffolk because that's what the Gemara refers to this child as. But we'll call him Chaim the Suffolk. That's going to be his name for today. So says the Gemara, what about Yerusha for this child when there are competing factors? And we're going to see today 4 or 5 cases that are quite similar to one another, which is what makes these Gemaras difficult. No one case is difficult. No one case is difficult, but the splitting of hairs and the different iterations generate different responses, which is what makes it's kind of like Eruvin in that way. That's where this comes. This isn't even a complex family tree. This is just, the cases are just so similar. So let's get started. And we're going to pick apart this Gemara to try and understand what happens in a case of Yerusha for the Suffolk. So let's say you have Suffolk v'yavam. You have Chaim the Safek. He's the child. We don't know if he belonged to Reuven or to Shimon. V'yavam, and you have Shimon, and they're trying to separate out the money from Reuven. Shabo lachlok benichse misna. They're trying to determine, let's say that Reuven had $1 million. We don't know if Chaim the Safek is his child. Might be Reuven's child, might be Shimon's child. And Shimon's also in the mix. He wants some of his brother's money as well. So Safek Amar, Chaim the Safek is going to argue, Amar, Ana bar misnahu v'nichsi didihu. I'm the child of Reuven. At least potentially I'm the child of Reuven. I should get all the money. $1 million to me because I'm his oldest and only child. The Yavam Amar Shmuel says, At biroe didiat. You also might be my child. And if that's true, v'leislach v'lo midi benichsi. And you, I'm still alive, says Shimon. You can't take my Yerusha. That's mine. What is that called in halacha? Second of the wide lines. This is a big shas concept. Have a mamon hamutal b'safek. Mamon hamutal b'safek choken. That we have money that's tied up in a way where there's a 50-50 claim. When there is such a claim, so then, Ayin Bava Metzia, the first page, we'll learn that when the time comes. But when there's Maman Amutal B'Safek, so then the halacha is 50-50. $500,000 goes to Chaim the Safek. $500,000 goes to Shimon. Case one. Case two. The Safek, Chaim the Safek, Uvnei Yavam, Shimon's children, just a slight iteration, right? But we will see that there are differences between these two cases. Shabo lachlok benichse misna. They're going to try and take Reuven's money through Shimon to get that money to them, says the Gemara. Safek, Chaim the Safek is going to say, Amar, he's going to say, Hahu Gavra, this guy, referencing himself, just kind of little tongue-in-cheek language. Me, bar misna, who, I'm really Reuven's son. Benichse didi, who don't touch my money. It's my money. Bnei Yavam Amar, the children of Shimon say, nope. Amre at achinu at. You're my brother. You're one of us. Uminta hu islach bahadan. You get to get a portion, a mana. You get to get a mana, a manta, a minta, like just like the rest of us. Whatever we get, you get in equal ratios, but you don't get everything. Says the Gemara, Savu Rabbanan Kamed Rab Misharshia Lememar Masnisinhi. This idea that we just saw is reflected in a Mishnah, though inverted, as we'll see in a moment. It's not. There is a case that we have later in this Masechta. I think it's on Daf Kuf. That's what it says over here. Yeah, Daf Kuf. And says the Gemara, in that particular case, Hu Eno Yoresh Osam Vehaim Yorshin Oso. He does not get their inheritance, but they get his inheritance. So if you take a look at Rashi, Dibur Hamaschel Safek Uvnei Yavam, which is about 20 lines down, about a quarter of the way down on the page. So he says, what is the case that we're dealing with? Let's look into that Rashi about 4 lines down. Mishum Hachi Savur Rabbanan Lemeimar Hainu Masnisen. This case that we just spoke about, where we have the Safek, Chaim the Safek, is arguing with the children of the Yavam of Shimon as to who gets Reuven's money. How is that similar? So Hainu Masnisin beperak nosin al ho'anusa diktani Safek ben Tisha l'Rishon, Safek ben Shiva l'Acharon. If this child either belongs to Reuven or Shimon, this is talking about Chaim the Safek, who lo yoresh osan, so he cannot inherit from the children, the Vadai children of either Reuven or Shimon. Lo zeh velo zeh. De bnei Rishon binchule eitzel bnei Acharon. Ubnei Acharon eitzel bnei Rishon. Because he can just say, no, you don't belong to my family, you belong to the other family. No, you don't belong to my family, you belong to the other family. He just gets thrown around. Behem yorshin oso bein shnein. But if the Safek child, if he ends up dying, then his money does get divvied up with the Vadai children of Reuven and Shimon. V'hacha, says the Gemara 6 lines into the wide lines, V'hacha ibcha. In our case, we actually are able to infer from here the reverse of this. How so? Hasam amre le, they're going to say to him, I see raya ushkol. Bring a raya that you're related to us, and then you can take some. But hacha, in our case, amar lahu, I su raya ushkulu. You're the ones who have to bring the raya. So we learned this idea from that Mishnah, but the case was slightly different, but we were able to infer from it still. But the Gemara says, no, you cannot learn from there. You cannot learn from that Mishnah on Daf Kuf. Amar lahu Rav Misharshia midami. These cases are not similar. Hasam, over there in that case, inhu vadai v'ihu safek. They, the brothers who are, there are children of Reuven who are Vadai Reuven's children. There are children of Shimon who are Vadai Shimon's children. And this one guy, Chaim the Safek, we don't know who his father is, the Ihu Safek. But Hacha, the case that we're dealing with is when Edi v'Edi Safek, they're both Svekos. It's a double Safek because in the case that we're dealing with the Safek and the Bnei Yavam, Everyone is an unknown. And that's rooted in the fact that we really don't know if Chaim the Safek belongs to Reuven or Shimon. Because if he belongs to Reuven, that money has no rights to the other people at all. That wasn't true in the other case, and therefore the Gemara rejects the comparison. Ella, idami lemas nisin. If you want to create a comparison that's similar to that Mishnah that we learned, the Mishnah about hu eno yoresh osam behem yorshin oso, it's lahadamya. It's similar to yet another case, the third case, which is quite similar to the cases we've been learning. L'safek uvnei yavam shabou lachlok benichse yavam gufe. Now we're talking about Chaim the Safek and the children of Shimon who are not trying to take Reuven's money, but are trying to take Shimon's money. Dehasam amre le aisi raya de'achvina atushkol. Bring me a raya that you're my brother and I'll give you some. And that is the case that is most similar to that Mishnah. And here's the fourth case that we're going to see, which is also still very similar. Safek uvnei yavam shabo lachlok benichse yavam. You have Chaim the Safek and the children of Shimon who are trying to take money from Shimon. Lebasar de palag yavam benichse misna. After they divvied up money from Reuven. Here's the case scenario. Reuven's a millionaire. This child, Chaim the Safek, is born. We don't know if he belongs to Reuven or Shimon. Reuven dies. Shimon takes a portion of that income, of that Yerusha money. Let's say he took $500,000, and then Shimon died. So now what's happening with that $500,000 that was Reuven's that he gave to Shimon? So says the Gemara, B'nei Yavam Amre, I see Raida Achvana Ahtushkol. You need to prove yourself. Amar Lahu, the child says to them, this is a brilliant line. Reuven, who might have been the father, and Shimon, who might have been the father, this child, Chaim the Safek, here's what he says. Amar Lahu, Chaim the Safek says, he says, no matter what, I need to be getting money. If I'm your brother, then then I should get a portion of that 500,000 just like you do. But if I'm the son of Reuven, you never should have gotten that money from Reuven. Says the Gemara, then the portion that Shimon took from Reuven when he died should never have been given to Shimon because I'm his child. So you can't have it both ways. Either way, this child is going to be getting money, and therefore he's upset. He wants to know. He's going to go to Beis Din and say, "Listen, it's not fair. I'm a Safek ben Reuven, Safek ben Shimon. I don't know. I nobody knows. No paternity tests. Now, when Reuven died, part of that money went to Shimon, and Shimon's kids are grabbing at the money when Shimon died. But maybe that money was never theirs, because if really I'm the child of Reuven, then when Reuven died, Shimon had no rights to that Yerusha money because I'm his child. That money should go to me." So what happens in Beis Din? Machlokes. 12 lines from the bottom. Rav Abba Amar, Rav Kam Bedina. Rav Abba Amar Rav says, Kam Dina. We keep things as they are. In other words, once potentially erroneously, the money that belonged to Reuven was given to Shimon B'Yerusha, we never go back. It's almost like a statute of limitations. Once the money changes hands from Reuven's estate to Shimon's estate as a Yerusha, even if it's wrong, it stays with Shimon. However, Rav Yirmi Amar, Hadar Dina, no, we reopen that case. We go back and we analyze and we try to figure out, is there a way we can figure out if Chaim the Safek belongs to Reuven or belongs to Shimon? And the Gemara says that this machlokes of Kam Dina versus Hadar Dina, once the money, right or wrong, was given from Reuven to Shimon, who were brothers. Once the money was transferred, do we leave it as is or do we reopen that case? Maybe, says the Gemara, Lemi, that's what plugta de Admon v'Rabbanon kimiflage. Maybe this is connected to a machlokes between Admon, who's the name of a Tana, and the Rabbanon. What do they argue about? Here's the case, a case out of left field. Ditnan, Mishahalach l'Medina Sayam. A person goes out of town, he's on sabbatical. The of the lo derech sadeh, he comes back home. He used to have a path from the main street to his field, but of the lo derech sadeh, somebody planted over it. Admon Amar Yelich B'Ktsara. Admon says shortest distance between 2 points is A and B. Whatever that distance is, that becomes my path. I'm allowed to reopen the case and say you guys did something wrong. However, v'chachamim omrim no yikach lo derech. He has to pay in order to get what he wants. Oh, yifrach be'avir, let him fly through the air. It's too late. The case is closed. You can already see the similarities in the cases. Admon is saying, that's not fair. Reopen the case. Go back in history. Who took his land? The other case is saying, no. We're done now. Now you have to pay to reopen the path. This is already very similar, but we're going to detail out the case first before the Gemara specifically makes its comparison. When we analyze this case, we see as follows. Lirabanan, according to the Rabbanan, what are you going to say? Shapir ka'amar admon. He said something right. I had a piece of property. I had a road from the main road to my piece of property, a dirt path. That was the only way for me to get there. Somebody took my land. So therefore, I get to make a path on your property because somebody took my property. Yeah, logically, you're right. The problem is that I have a piece of property right here. And in my absence, when I was out on sabbatical, my property was fully surrounded by 4 different owners. Who do I force to give me the property, say the Rabbanan? What am I supposed to do? I can't just force them, says the Gemara. Okay, yeah, I hear that. So the property that I own in the middle is property number 1. Properties 2, 3, 4, and 5 surround my property, and I want my property to have a path to it. So Admon said, hey, great, no problem. Rabbanan, what do you say? Well, that's not fair. Who's the one who has to give up the land? Ihachi, my time of the Admon. Oh, so if the case is really like you're saying now, that it's surrounded by 4 other properties and there is no clear option as to how to make a path to your land, then why was Admon so quick to say, go take over someone's property? The Amar Rava, the Arba da Asumi Koach Arba, 4 people purchased land from 4 people, or the Arba da Asumi Koach Echad, or 4 people who bought the properties from 1. But either way, right now, there are 4 different owners. In that case, says the Gemara, Kule Alma Lo Pligi de Matzu Mirchile. In that case, everyone agrees, even Admon agrees, that if there are 4 owners who have property surrounding yours, and over your sabbatical, you lost your path from the road, the dirt path from the road to your land, even Admon agrees that in that case, you're not allowed to take someone's property, because property number 2 is going to say, it's not me, go to property number 3. Guy number 3 is going to say, it's not me, go to guy 2, 4, and 5. It's not me. It's not me, it's not me. And everyone's going to shirk the responsibility to give him his land back. Keep pligi. Where do Admon and the Chachamim argue? Bechad de Asi Mikoach Arba, where one guy purchased 4 properties and they all happen to surround my property. Admon Savar Matzi Amar Le Kol Makom Darchi Gabahu. Because you now own all 4 properties, by definition, you have taken over the dirt path from the main road to my land because you're the only owner. Who else? You can't push me to anybody else. You own everything. Of course, you're the guy who has to give me back a strip of land. The Rabbanan Savre, that rabbis argue and say, no, Damar Le, Shaskis, if you're quiet, we'll work out a deal, the Elo. And if not, here's the threat that the Rabbanan say. What can the guy who owns the 4 properties say? I'm not giving up land. I'm just going to transfer the deed back to the initial 4 owners from whom I bought from, and then I'll throw you from property to property. This one's owned by my friend Chaim, this one's owned by my friend Yankiv, this one's owned by my friend whoever. So says the Gemara, that's the machlokas. And there won't be anything to do. So this is the end of that story where we see this machlokas, where Admon says you are allowed to force someone to give a little land if all of the property is owned by one person, whereas the Rabbanan say not. So says the Gemara, 3 lines from the bottom, Lema, maybe we should say, Rabbi Abba de Omar Kirabanan. Rabbi Abba, who's of the opinion, if we look up his sheet, is about 10 lines from the bottom. He says that the case is closed. Leave it be. Once Reuven gave the money to Shimon in death in Yerusha, the posthumous Yerusha, then the conversation's over. We're not reopening the case. We're not giving the money back to Shimon, to Reuven, and back down to Chaim the Suffolk. And maybe Rav Yirmiyah de Omar Ke'admon. Rav Yirmiyah who says, hey, that's not fair. That's not fair, that maybe the money really does belong to Chaim the Suffolk and Reuven was his father. And the money was given to Shimon in error. So then we should reopen the case. And here too bad. Open up my field. It's my field. You took it. It's not fair. Says the Gemara, a great comparison. Amar lach Rabbi Abba, not true. Ana da'amre afilu ke'admon. Rabbi Abba, who by our case says, case closed, we're not going to transfer money back from Shimon to Reuven. He says, I might even agree with Admon about pushing people to give me a strip of land to get to my property. Because Admon he had a logic to say that to him, top of Lamed Ches Min Aleph, Darki Chad Gabachu, you own at least one of those properties. Aval Hacha, But in the actual case that we're dealing with, there is no such thing. We don't know how much money to ask for. The status of Chaim the Sub, he doesn't even know what he's asking for. Is he asking for all the money back through Reuven? Is he asking for a portion along with Edom? We don't know because his request is not specific, so the cases are not comparable. The Rav Yirmiyah, who was willing to reopen the case in order to determine whether or not the money should go back from Shimon's family to Reuven's family. No, I would even say that in the case of the land, of the strip of land that was consumed over sabbatical, I would even agree with the Rabbanan that you're not allowed to do that. Over there, in the case of the land that grew over the dirt path that leads to your field, they say because I could always just give back the deed to the initial four owners. But in our case, there's no way to reverse the case. The logics don't apply. The full extent of the logic from the case of the stolen land doesn't apply over here. It's not enough of a match. The Gemara is going to continue tomorrow. We'll pick up. We're going to stop here. The Gemara will pick up tomorrow with yet another iteration of this case, Safek v'Yavam. That's about 8 lines down. We'll pick up from there tomorrow. That's Thursday. Tomorrow, 8:40. Friday morning in person after the 6:30 Shachris, after the Siyum, which will be after the 6:30 Shachris. I approximate around 7:30. Shabbos and Sunday is 45 minutes before. Chol HaMoed is at 8:40. That's a mistake in the announcements. It's at 8:40. The only real exception to the rule is the last day of Yontif. I know there are people who want to hear Rabbi Twersky. So instead of doing Mincha on the last day of Yontif, 45 minutes before Mincha, we're going to do 45 minutes before Rabbi Twersky. And that way, those who want to attend can attend that as well. We'll stop right here. Wishing you all a beautiful night. What's that?
What time would that be?
Don't know. Got to look in the announcements.
That day's tomorrow, so.